and welcome to another reading lesson. On Monday, we got to read this new text from Sheep to Sweater. Today's text, the text that we read on Monday, tells how different people work together to make a sweater. Before we dive into our reading thinking job, your teacher is going to pause the video and you guys are going to talk about when have you worked together with someone and what were you trying to do? I see my kindergarten kipsters work together all the time throughout the day to make their day great. So you are all doing a great job at working together. Today's reading thinking job for our text from Sheep to Sweater is I can identify reasons to support a key point. We dove into the illustrations on Monday, and today we're going to use that skill to help us identify why with the support of key points. In an earlier lesson, we practiced identifying details that support a key point in the book, The Post Office Book. Today, we're going to continue to practice from the text, from Sheep to Sweater, to understand a different topic. Remember, it's important to look for those details that show key points are true. Key points are very similar to key details. We're going to think about those details to help us understand the key point. Our reading thinking steps to get to our reading thinking job. We're first going to ask ourselves, what is something important the text teaches us? Then we're going to find details to help us understand the pictures and the words. Then we're going to ask ourselves, how do the details from the pictures and words help us understand that key point? To Sweater by Robin Nelson. Table of contents. On this page, you can find the topics on each page and find the page numbers to go to. A sweater keeps me warm. How is it made? Sheep are raised on farms or ranches. A farmer raises sheep. The farmer feeds the sheep every day. The sheep eat a mixture of hay, grass, and grains. This food helps the sheep to grow thick, healthy coats of wool. The coats are clipped in the spring. The sheep's coats are clipped. This is called shearing. A person shears each sheep's wool off in one big piece called a fleece. The sheep will grow another coat over the summer to keep it warm in the winter. The wool is sorted. Workers sort the wool. They remove wool that is dark or dirty, and they keep thick wool that is light in color. The wool is washed and dried. Workers wash the wool many times. Washing removes bugs, straw, and mud from the wool. Then the wool is dried. The wool is combed. Workers or machines comb the wool to remove knots. This is called carding. Carding makes the wool soft. The yarn is spun. A spinning wheel twists the wool. The wool forms long pieces of string. The yarn is dyed. The yarn is still the color of a sheep. The yarn must be dyed to change its color. A worker dips the wool in a color liquid to dye it. You can be dyed any color of the rainbow. Yarn can be dyed any color of the rainbow. Shoppers buy the yarn. Trucks take the yarn to stores. People go to a store to buy yarn. This woman picks out blue and pink yarn. A sweater is made. One way of turning yarn into a sweater is by knitting. A knitter uses two long needles to make loops and knots with the yarn. The yarn is knitted into the shape of a sweater. I wear my new sweater. The wool in my sweater used to keep a sheep warm. Now it keeps me warm. This is the glossary and the index. This is in the back of the book. This is where you can find words and what they mean, as well as look for important information and go back in the book. Diving into pages and finding supporting details for our key point, we need to talk about what is our key point of the text. Your teacher's going to pause the video and you guys are going to discuss what is this text mostly about. This text is mostly about making a sweater, learning the process, the things that we have to do, the steps we have to do, starting from the sheep all the way to making a sweater. So now let's dive into some pages from the text to help us get supporting details to help us better understand our key point of making a sweater. In a moment, your teacher is going to pause the video and you guys are going to answer the question, what is one supporting detail on these pages? And how does it help you understand the key point of making a sweater? Looking at the illustration and hearing the words, we learn the yarn must be dyed to change its color. It also tells us why the yarn is dyed, and we can see a worker dips the wool into a colored liquid to dye it, which matches our words. It also tells who dyes it and how they do it. These supporting details help us better understand the key point of making a sweater, that this process of dyeing the yarn gives us the colors of the sweaters that we wear. If we didn't have this process, we would just be walking around with white sweaters. And I know all of you guys love color. Okay, in a moment, your teacher is going to pause the video and you guys are going to talk about the details on these pages. What is one supporting detail on these pages? And how does it help you understand the key point of making a sweater? We learn on these pages that it's all about buying yarn. We can see a picture of the woman buying yarn. It shows what yarn looks like when you buy it. It tells us people go to the store to buy yarn. And it also tells where people can buy yarn. And we can see that the yarn is different colors, which is important to know from the previous detail we talked about. All of these supporting details about buying yarn, where you can buy it, what it looks like, and who can buy it, helps us better understand the key point of making a sweater. You need yarn to make a sweater. Where does the yarn come from? You're right. The yarn comes from the wool, from the sheep. Now let's talk about the different events. We know that there are many steps to make a sweater. So now I want you to think of the events. Just like we talk about beginning, middle, end in our text, I want you to look at these pages and talk about what are two events on these pages and what details can we draw and label about each event. So talk about the two events and then draw and label what details for each event. So when I was looking at these two pages, I decided the two events were they were cutting the wool and they were sorting the wool. The coats are clipped and the wool is sorted. So I took these illustrations and I drew and labeled my own. I was able to draw a sheep with the wool cut and label it, and then I was able to draw the wool being sorted. Here's the white wool, and here is the clean wool and the dirty wool and the person. Sort wool, cut wool. Now I want you to decide, and you probably already decided this, which event came first. Did you say cut wool? You're right. What more have you learned about how people work together to make a sweater? You probably talked about they have to make sure they know how to use the machines, pay close attention to when they're cutting the wool off the sheep and when they're sorting the wool, as well as when they're dyeing the wool, and when they're making the yarn to put in stores. We've talked about all the details we can find in From Sheep to Sweater to help us better understand the process, the steps from making for making a sweater. We also talked about events that happen first. Now it's your turn. In Seesaw, you are going to be looking at the page of the wool being washed and dried and underline a supporting detail on the page that helps the reader understand why the wool is washed. Then you are going to do the work you did during the lesson on the next page by drawing the two events and circling the event that came first. Until next time, bye, Kipsters.